I returned from work one day to see my mother and sister standing in my apartment. Ready to move in? How nice of you to renovate this place for your sister. My mom said in your dreams, I responded. When you spend your whole life being the easy one, people start to assume you'll just roll over forever. That you'll smile through the sting nod when they twist the knife and somehow still show up for family dinners with a gift and a thank you. That was me for most of my life. The dependable one, the peacemaker, the one who always figured it out quietly in the background while louder voices took center stage. But there's only so many times someone can test your patience before something inside you just snaps. I'm 26, and up until 6 months ago I thought I had a decent relationship with my mom. Not great. Let's not pretend we were ever hugging it out over coffee, but functional civil. We talked every week usually about how my sister was doing or what my cousin's kids were up to. Typical small talk, the kind of stuff you half listen to while doing dishes. I never really noticed how one-sided those calls were until things blew up. My sister Leah is 29, and growing up she was the storm while I was the shelter. Every family has that dynamic. One kid who burns through grace like matches, and another who quietly learns how to stay out of the smoke. Leah was always pushing boundaries. She crashed a car at 17 and got a new one within a week, dropped out of college twice, dated guys who gave off every red flag in the book, and somehow she was always the victim. My mom, for reasons I've never fully understood, treated her like a glass ornament, fragile and precious no matter how sharp her edges were. Me, I was sturdy, self-sufficient, not in need of the same kind of help. At least that's how she put it. I moved out the second I turned 18, saved every penny from my part-time job, skipped spring breaks, missed parties, worked weekends because I knew if I ever wanted a place of my own, no one was going to hand it to me. And after 8 years of grinding side gigs and living below my means, I finally did it. I bought a small, slightly run-down apartment in a not-so-fancy but quiet part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The walls were a dull yellow, the floor creaked near the bathroom, and the kitchen cabinets had handles that fell off if you pulled too hard, but the place had potential. More than that, it had meaning. I spent every weekend for the next 3 months fixing it up. Painted the walls a soft gray blue I'd fallen in love with on a home design block. Replaced the cracked tiles in the kitchen myself after watching way too many YouTube tutorials. Even installed a floating shelf system in the living room to display a few books and plants. I didn't have a lot, but every single thing in that space had a story behind it. The couch picked it up off Craigslist for a steal, reupholstered it with my friend Emma over 3 pizza-fueled weekends. The TV stand my old desk repurposed and painted matte black. It was my first real home, and I poured myself into every square inch. My mom came by once during the renovations. She stood in the middle of the living room while I explained how I'd patched the drywall myself and nodded slowly, distracted. Her eyes drifted from the unfinished baseboards to the ceiling fan I hadn't installed yet. Then she said, "Leah is going through a rough patch, you know. She might need a place to crash soon." I blinked at her, holding a screwdriver in one hand and a dripping paintbrush in the other. "I'm sure she'll figure something out," I said, not thinking much of it. Leah always needed something, and somehow, someone always swooped in to save her. But there was something in the way my mom looked at me then, like I was just holding on to something she hadn't quite decided I deserved yet. I brushed it off, just another offhand Leah comment in a sea of Leah comments. At that point, I trained myself not to react. It was easier that way. I didn't want to start a fight, especially not while I was finally building something of my own. A few weeks later, I finally moved in. I slept on that Craigslist couch the first night because my bed hadn't arrived yet, and I didn't even care. I just remember lying there, looking up at the freshly painted ceiling and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Like I'd finally stepped out of someone else's shadow and into my own life. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone anything. No roommates, no landlords, no noise. Just me and my little apartment. I didn't even tell most of my extended family. I wasn't trying to flex, I just wanted to enjoy it quietly. My mom knew, of course. She even came by once or twice after I moved in, always with a slight edge of surprise in her voice. "It's really cozy," she'd say, running her fingers over the wood countertop I spent 2 weekends staining. Then she'd immediately pivot into some drama about Leah's latest breakup or car trouble. I'd nod, offer generic support, and try to change the subject. I should have known something was off when she started asking about my work schedule. "Do you work late on Thursdays?" she'd ask during one of our weekend calls. Or, "Are you still going to that gym across town? What time do you usually leave?" It was weird, but again, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just trying to make conversation. Then one Friday night after a long day at work, I came home to find my key didn't work. At first, I thought I'd grabbed the wrong one. I jiggled it, twisted it, even checked my wallet to make sure I wasn't losing it. But no, it was the same key I'd used every day for the past 2 months. I knocked confused, waited, knocked again louder this time. I was starting to panic when I heard movement inside. Footsteps, then voices, and then the door opened. There, standing in my apartment was Leah. Hair in a messy bun, wearing an oversized hoodie I recognized as mine from high school. Holding a wine glass like she'd just settled in for a relaxing evening, she looked at me like I was the one intruding. "Trevor," she said, blinking like I'd just shown up uninvited. "What are you doing here?" I just stared at her. I couldn't form words. My brain couldn't compute what was happening. "This is my place," I finally said. "What are you doing here?" She had the audacity to look annoyed. "Mom said you were barely home and I needed a fresh start. My lease was up and I couldn't keep staying with Dan after the breakup, so..." I stepped back, heartbeat thudding in my ears. "She gave you a key." Leah didn't answer, but I could see it all in her face. "She changed the lock," I said slowly, more to myself than to her. "You guys changed the lock on my apartment." Leah crossed her arms. "Mom said it made more sense for me to stay here. You're barely home anyway and I need it." I turned around and walked straight to my car, hands shaking. I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. I just knew if I stayed 1 second longer, I was going to say something I couldn't take back. And the worst part, as I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of her through the window, sitting back down on my couch, the one I reupholstered, the one we spent 3 weekends fixing up. That's when I knew this wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't some temporary situation. They planned this. And that's when everything changed. When I say I sat in my car for over an hour that night, I mean it literally. Engine off, headlights dimming, phone buzzing with 2 missed calls from my mom, and a text from Leah that said, "Didn't mean to upset you. Come back when you've calmed down." I read it 3 times. Calm down. She was living in my apartment, using my things, drinking wine out of a glass I bought from a thrift shop for 50 cents and was proud of. And now, she was telling me to calm down. I didn't reply. I just stared through the windshield at the dark suburban street, trying to process how this happened, how I had become the one knocking on a locked door, while my sister settled into a home I built with scraped knees and maxed out energy drinks. The betrayal wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, it was subtle, cold, calculated. I ended up crashing at a friend's place that night, an old college buddy, Marco, who didn't ask many questions, just handed me a blanket and said, "You good?" And I said, "Yeah," even though I clearly wasn't. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I drove straight to my apartment complex and parked across the street. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I wasn't going to just disappear. I needed answers, closure, justice, if that was even still a thing in this situation. But when I got out of the car and tried my key again, nothing had changed. Leah was still there. I knocked harder this time, louder. After a minute, the door opened, and this time my mom was standing next to her. I don't know if they were waiting for me or what, but the whole thing felt staged. My mom's arms were crossed. She didn't look surprised to see me. "We need to talk," she said. "Yeah, no kidding." I stepped inside, my eyes flicking to the living room. Leah's shoes on my rug, her duffel bag spilling clothes onto the floor, my bookshelf rearranged. A framed photo of her and her ex-boyfriend was now on my side table like this was some Airbnb she was making her own. I stood there, jaw clenched, and my mom launched into what I can only describe as a lecture. "Trevor, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but you have to look at the bigger picture here. Leah's been through a lot. The breakup, the car getting repossessed, her job falling through, and that's my problem now." Voice sharper than I intended. "You gave her a key to my place without asking. You changed my locks." Mom waved a hand dismissively like I was being dramatic. "We didn't change them. We just had a locksmith come in." "That's literally changing them," I snapped. Leah rolled her eyes. "God, Trevor, it's not like I'm wrecking the place. You barely even live here. You're always working or at Marco's." That one hit different. I'd told her that in confidence once when she asked why I hadn't bought a gaming console yet, too busy to use it. I didn't realize she was storing that line for later to use as ammunition. My mom said, "You have a good job. You're stable. Leah isn't. She needs this more than you do." And there it was, the line that broke something inside me. It wasn't the key or the couch or even the locks. It was that sentence, "She needs this more than you do." Not because she earned it, not because she deserved it, but because she was struggling. And in my mom's world, struggle was currency. It meant everyone else had to bend around it. I turned to Leah. "How long were you planning to stay here?" She shrugged. "Until I find something better, maybe a few months." It's not like you're in a rush. You can come by whenever like a visitor in my own home. That's when I walked out. Didn't say a word, just walked. I could hear my mom saying something behind me, but it was muffled, drowned out by the roaring in my ears. That weekend, I didn't go back. I stayed with Marco and tried to focus on work, but I was spiraling. My safe place had been stolen not just physically, but emotionally. Every time I thought about the money I'd put into that place, the hours I spent choosing paint colors, the busted knuckles from assembling furniture by hand, it made my stomach turn. And my mom, she didn't even call to check on me, not once. On Tuesday, I finally cracked and tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Then I tried Leah. "Hey." She answered like we were old friends catching up. "I want you out of my apartment," I said. Silence. Then laughter. "Seriously, I'm not joking," she scoffed. "Mom said I could stay." I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom doesn't own that apartment." "I do. It's legally mine." Another pause. Then she said something that still makes my blood run cold. "Well, she has the spare key, so technically she can let whoever she wants in." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just inconsiderate, this was malicious. They weren't planning on leaving anytime soon. They had decided together that my independence was negotiable. That week, I started gathering paperwork. Deed of ownership, HOA agreements, lease details. I made an appointment with a lawyer friend I barely knew just to find out what I could do. He was blunt. "You're the legal owner. If she refuses to leave, you can file an unlawful detainer." The word evict felt so surreal, like I was some cartoon landlord with a mustache waving a cane at a tenant. But this wasn't a tenant. This was my sister. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the entitlement ran. Because it didn't stop at the apartment. A few days later, I stopped by to grab some of my stuff, a box of tools I'd left in the hall closet. I knocked first out of some leftover sense of courtesy. Leah answered the door, barely looking up from her phone. "What now?" she muttered. I stepped inside and saw the damage. My succulents dead. The shelf I installed half-collapsed, overloaded with junk. The walls scuffed the place, smelling like some weird combo of vanilla body spray and takeout. My home looked like a dorm room after finals week. I didn't even ask. I just walked past her and opened the closet. "Hey," she snapped. "You can't just barge in here like that." I turned, stunned. "Barge in? This is my apartment." Her eyes narrowed. "Not when I'm living in it." That was the last straw. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. "This is Trevor Barnes. I am the legal owner of this apartment. My sister Leah has refused to leave and has changed the locks without my consent." "Are you recording me?" she shrieked. "Yup," I said. "You'll be hearing from a lawyer." I left without another word. 2 days later, I emailed my mom. Not a call, not a text, an email. Formal, cold, professional. Effective immediately. Leah is no longer permitted to remain in my apartment. Any refusal to vacate will result in legal action. I have spoken to an attorney and will be filing a complaint if necessary. If she has any personal belongings she wishes to collect, she may do so within 48 hours under supervision. No response. Not for hours. Then finally, a short reply. "You're making a huge mistake. She's your sister. Family should help each other. If this is how you repay love, I pity you." No apology, no recognition of what they'd done, just guilt. Classic. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. Late that Friday night, I got a call from the front desk of the building. The concierge sounded confused. "Hey, Mr. Barnes, there's a bit of a situation in your unit." My stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "Well, your sister and your mom are here arguing loudly." Security had to go up. "They're fighting over furniture. I didn't even grab my jacket. I just bolted." By the time I arrived, there were 3 people standing in the hallway outside my apartment. The building manager, a security guard, and my mom, arms flailing, voice raised red in the face. Leah stood in the doorway holding my couch cushion like a shield, yelling something about it being half hers because she helped me pick it out from Craigslist. They were literally arguing about my couch, the couch Emma and I reupholstered. The manager turned to me like I was the adult in the room. "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I took a deep breath, and that's when I said the words that would set the entire chain of events in motion. "This is my apartment. Neither of them live here. I want them removed." The manager raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" I nodded. And then, for the first time in my life, I watched as my mom, my own mother, was escorted out of my home. And Leah, she looked at me like I'd committed treason. But I didn't feel guilty, not anymore. Because in that moment, something inside me finally clicked into place. I wasn't the easy one. I was just done playing by their rules. I wish I could tell you that watching them walk out was some glorious, empowering moment, that I stood tall with my arms crossed, like the final scene of a movie, the soundtrack swelling behind me as justice was finally served. But the truth, I collapsed onto the floor the second the door closed behind them. The couch cushion Leah had been arguing over was still on the floor, its fabric stretched where she'd clutched it like a lifeline, a weird symbol of how twisted everything had become. That couch wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a project, a memory, a metaphor. And now, it looked like a battlefield trophy. I sat there, shoulders hunched, staring at the dent where her duffel bag had been, the faint smell of her body spray still lingering like smoke after a fire. I'd won technically, but I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt wrecked. The next few days were a blur. I took time off work not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't concentrate. My phone stayed silent, except for a couple of texts from Marco checking in. "You good, man? Need a beer?" Or 10. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to explain that the person who hurt me most wasn't some ex or coworker. It was my mother. And that it wasn't a clean wound. It was layered, complicated years in the making, like a scab that finally ripped off to reveal it had never healed right in the first place. I did hear from my mom eventually. She called 4 days later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. No greeting, no apology. Just, "I hope you're proud of yourself. Leah's staying with me now. She's devastated. You've broken this family." That was the moment I realized she wasn't going to apologize, not now, not ever. In her mind, I was the villain for setting boundaries, for refusing to sacrifice what I'd built for the sake of someone else's chaos. And that realization broke me. That night, I laid in my bed, my actual bed finally, and stared at the ceiling fan I'd installed myself, watching the blades spin. I'd done everything right. Worked hard, stayed quiet, didn't ask for much. And still, it wasn't enough. I thought about selling the apartment seriously, just packing it all up and starting fresh somewhere else. Maybe a new city, new job, new number. Just erase the whole chapter and pretend it never happened. But then something stopped me. I think it was the floorboard near the bathroom, the one that always creaked when you stepped on it, no matter how careful you were, the one I'd planned to fix a dozen times but secretly liked, because it made the place feel real, lived in mine. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and brewed a pot of coffee at 11:30 p.m. Then I opened my laptop and made a list titled, "What I Still Control." It had 2 items. My time, my space. That's it. Everything else, family, emotions, relationships, felt like a minefield. But those 2, those were still mine. So I started with what I could control. The next morning I threw out everything Leah had touched. Not in a dramatic, angry purge, just methodically, quietly, like scrubbing off graffiti. Her shampoo, her takeout containers, the old hoodies she left on the floor, even the coffee mugs she'd brought from Mom's house, chipped and mismatched. Then I spent the next week reclaiming the apartment, not just physically, but mentally. I repainted the walls she'd scuffed, dragging her suitcase in. Deep forest green, rich, clean mine. I ordered a new throw blanket to replace the one she'd spilled wine on. I rearranged the bookshelf, bought a new rug, and replaced every light bulb in the place. I even got one of those scented diffusers and made the entire apartment smell like cedar and citrus instead of anxiety and resentment. Bit by bit, breath by breath, I started to breathe again. Marco came by one weekend with a 6-pack and a confused look on his face. "This place looks different," he said, plopping onto the now pristine couch. "It is," I said. He nodded slowly, then looked at me sideways. "You good?" I shrugged. "Getting there." He handed me a beer. For what it's worth, that was the most insane story I've ever heard. "Still living it," I muttered. "Yeah, well, you handled it better than I would have. I'd have set the place on fire." I laughed and it felt real. First time in a while. That's when the shift started. Not a big explosion, just small changes. A subtle pivot toward healing. I started going back to the gym. Not because I wanted abs or whatever, but because I needed somewhere to put the rage, the confusion, the grief. I stopped answering my mom's calls. At first it felt like holding my breath underwater, but over time it became easier, liberating even. I set my phone to do not disturb every evening after 7 o'clock. Stopped checking social media, started journaling instead. One night I wrote, "I used to think being the bigger person meant keeping the peace. Now I think it means protecting your peace." I taped that to my fridge. Eventually, I signed up for a local woodworking class. Totally random. I'd never worked with wood before, beyond the occasional IKEA nightmare, but I needed something tactile, something I could shape with my hands. By week 3, I'd made a small end table with dovetail joints and a walnut top. It was crooked wobbly, but it was mine. The instructor, an older guy named Ron, clapped me on the back and said, "You got an eye for it." "Just learning," I said. "Aren't we all?" He grinned. Meanwhile, life outside the apartment kept moving. Promotions opened up at work. I didn't take them yet, but I felt the pull again. The ambition I'd buried beneath survival mode was waking up. One Friday afternoon, my manager asked if I consider mentoring a new hire. I hesitated. I'd barely been holding myself together. How could I guide someone else? But I said yes. Her name was Grace, 22, fresh out of college, full of ideas and nerves. Watching her ask questions and light up with every little success reminded me why I'd started this job in the first place. "You're really patient," she said one day. I blinked. "What, you explain things like you actually care if I understand?" I smiled. "Someone did that for me once. It wasn't true. No one really had, but I wanted to be that person for someone else." Around this time, Leah posted a photo on Instagram of her new studio apartment. I stared at it for a full minute. It was clearly my mom's basement dressed up with some string lights and a filter. Her caption read, "Sometimes life forces you to rebuild, and sometimes that's a blessing in disguise." No mention of me, no apology, just a curated version of the truth where she was the phoenix and I was the fire. I didn't like it, didn't comment, didn't say a word, because I'd stopped needing her to acknowledge what she did. She'd taken something from me. Yes, but I'd taken something back myself. One night I came home from class and stood in the entryway of my apartment just looking. The green wall, the new table, the faint scent of cedar and lemon. It didn't feel like a war zone anymore. It felt like a home mine. That's when I made the decision. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank document and titled it "The Next Move." And at the top, I wrote, "Find a lawyer." Because while I'd spent the last few months healing, they hadn't stopped. I'd gotten wind through a cousin that my mom had been telling people I'd kicked them out onto the street and stole back the apartment. And Leah. She was applying for a loan using my address as her residence history. That's when I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. But this time, I wasn't reacting from a place of pain. This time, I was planning, and I was ready. It's strange how clarity arrives, not like a thunderclap, but like sunrise through blackout curtains. Slow, subtle, relentless. One minute you're sitting in silence trying to forget what they did to you. The next you realize forgetting isn't justice, it's just silence in disguise, and I wasn't interested in silence anymore. Leah and my mom had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They didn't just violate my space, they weaponized my kindness, twisted it into a weakness, exploited it, and expected me to thank them for it. For months I'd internalized the whole thing, tried to make sense of it, tried to heal. But healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means doing something about it. So I did the one thing I should have done months earlier. I opened a legal pad, wrote "revenge" at the top, not in all caps like some movie villain, just quiet underlined, and began drafting a plan. No yelling, no drama, no burned bridges, just calm, patient, undeniable consequences. The first step was research, and I had a lot of it to do. I started by digging into everything I could find about property rights, occupancy laws, and lock-changing regulations. I bookmarked landlord forums, tenant boards, and real estate legal blogs. I even consulted a subreddit where people shared stories about evicting squatter relatives. I wasn't alone in this kind of betrayal. It turns out there's a whole genre of people out there who've had to fight for what's already theirs. The more I learned, the more strategic I became. I already knew Leah had tried to use my address on a loan application. One of my younger cousins accidentally let it slip during a family group chat, said something like, "Oh, I didn't know you two were living together again. That's what Aunt Carla said." That opened a can of worms I wasn't prepared for. But I was glad it had spilled because now I had proof. See, Leah never updated her address officially when she moved in. She just used mine, probably thought it didn't matter. But using someone's residence without permission, on a legal or financial document, that's a line you can't blur, and I was going to press on it. So I called up a lawyer. Not the friend of a friend I saw months earlier. I wanted someone sharp, professional, a bulldog in a blazer. I found her through an online review rabbit hole. Her name was Jennifer Rhodes, mid-40s, blunt as hell with a client list full of small business owners and petty family disputes turned ugly. I sent a long, detailed email. She called me within 24 hours. "I read your message," she said. "Sounds like your sister and mother are riding shotgun in a car they don't own." "That's one way to put it," I replied. She chuckled. "You want scorched earth or a velvet dagger?" I paused. Something in between. I don't want to destroy them. I want them to understand they crossed a line and make sure they can't do it again. I can work with that, she said. We met in her office 2 days later. She sat across from me, flipping through printed screenshots, text messages, HOA documents, and bank statements I'd organized into a 3-ring binder. I'd never been more prepared for anything in my life. When she finished, she nodded once. This is clean. You've got ownership, paper trail, intent. Hell, you even have the emotional manipulation in writing. That voicemail from your mom? She whistled. That's Exhibit A in a civil harassment case if you wanted one. I blinked. I didn't even think of that. Well, I did, she said, snapping the binder shut. Here's what we're going to do. And that's when the plan began. We started small. First, Jennifer drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to Leah, firm, factual, emotionless. It laid out that she was never a legal tenant, that her use of my address on financial documents was a violation, that any future misrepresentation would result in immediate legal action. It even included a demand that she remove any personal belongings still on the premises within 10 business days, or they'd be discarded. The letter was sent via certified mail and email and delivered to my mom's address. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then an email from Leah. Wow, real mature Trevor. You couldn't even pick up the phone. You're seriously threatening me with a lawyer now, after everything I've been through? I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Jennifer. She smiled. Perfect. Emotional manipulation classic. We'll use it if needed. Then came the second stage address fraud. Jennifer filed a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Then we submitted a written report to the credit agency Leah had used on her application, backed up with property ownership records and timestamps. This wasn't about getting her arrested. It was about blocking her from using me again. Next, I contacted my building's HOA and formally requested to block any guests associated with Leah or my mother from being granted entry without my written consent. The building manager was more than willing to comply, especially once I showed them the footage security had recorded the night of the couch incident. That footage, oh, I forgot to mention, I requested a copy of it and I watched it more than once. It wasn't just arguing, it was my mom screaming about how I owed Leah a place to stay, Leah trying to unplug my TV while the security guard pulled her hands away. The raw entitlement caught on camera like a bad reality show. I didn't post it anywhere, but I saved it just in case. Then came the social piece. I wasn't about to go on a family smear campaign, but I didn't want to stay silent anymore either. So I did something subtle. I made a post, a single Instagram photo, the green-painted living room wall, my new end table, a steaming mug on top, captioned, "Rebuilding means reclaiming brick by brick." No drama, no names, but everyone knew what it meant. And that apparently burned. Because within 24 hours, I got a text from my mom. "Trevor, that post was petty and unnecessary. You're making us look bad." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then typed back, "I don't have to make you look bad. You did that yourself." She didn't reply, and I didn't need her to. Around this time, I started gathering allies, quiet ones. Cousins who'd always whispered about the favoritism, but never said it out loud. A family friend who admitted she'd seen the cracks years ago but didn't want to get involved. People began reaching out. "Hey man, I didn't realize it was that bad. I always wondered why Leah got away with so much. My mom said your mom's been telling everyone you kicked Leah out with no warning." That true. And for the first time, I didn't deflect. I told the truth. Yes, she stole my key, took over my home, changed the locks. My mom helped her. I gave them weeks to leave. They refused. So I had to escalate. People went quiet after that, but they stopped calling me the villain. Meanwhile, Jennifer helped me draft a letter to my mortgage company ensuring they added a flag to prevent any co-signing or inquiries under my name. We added a fraud alert to my credit. I locked down everything because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protecting what I'd built. And once I was certain every legal door had been closed to them, I waited. Because I knew something was coming. Something big. And when it came, I'd be ready. It didn't come all at once. That's the thing about real consequences. They don't usually show up with a dramatic soundtrack or a viral video. They creep in like fog. Silent, inevitable. It started with a knock at my door. I opened it to find a courier holding an envelope with my name neatly printed on the front. Inside was a letter from Jennifer, my lawyer, with a note clipped to the top. "Thought you'd want a hard copy of this. Enjoy." The letter itself, an official notice from one of the credit bureaus confirming that a fraudulent address had been removed from an active loan application and the applicant had been notified. The phrasing was dry, bureaucratic, but the weight behind it, that was the first domino. A few days later, I heard from my cousin Melissa. She's one of the few relatives I still trusted. Smart, observant, a little too quiet at family events. She sent me a message that simply read, "Leah's loan got denied. Big scene at Aunt Carla's house. She's blaming you." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I didn't take anything from her. I just stopped giving, because that's what it had always been. Giving and giving and giving, until I had nothing left. It wasn't just the loan either. Apparently Leah had been planning to use that loan to start some kind of wellness business. One of those pop-up boutique things selling crystals and overpriced herbal teas out of a storefront she hadn't even secured yet. She'd already ordered inventory, told friends, bragged about it on her social media. Now without the loan, it all unraveled. Her Instagram went quiet for 3 weeks, then suddenly reappeared with a new caption. "Taking a break from toxic energy. Protecting my peace. Classic Leah." Meanwhile, I received an email from my HOA board. One of the residents had filed a complaint that 2 women were repeatedly trying to enter the building using a disconnected access code. They were denied each time thanks to the block I'd put in place. I asked if security footage confirmed who it was. They replied with a still image. There they were, my mom and Leah standing outside the glass entry doors. My mom visibly fuming while Leah stared at her phone like the code was just slow to load. I saved the image, not out of pettiness, out of proof, because I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, a week later my mom called, again after weeks of silence. After months of guilt-tripping and half-truths, she finally left a voicemail that began with, "Trevor, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Leah's just been under a lot of pressure lately." I didn't listen to the rest. I saved it, forwarded it to Jennifer, then blocked the number, because now I had everything in writing, and it was time to use it. Jennifer helped me draft a formal legal notice, something I never thought I'd send to my own family. It included documentation of trespassing attempts, misuse of address, previous illegal occupancy, and the refusal to vacate when asked. It cited local statutes. It mentioned potential civil harassment proceedings. It was beautiful. We sent it to both Leah and my mom via certified mail. This time the silence was immediate. No calls, no emails, no toxic energy posts, just quiet. Until one morning I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail until instinct told me to pick up. It was my uncle. My mom's older brother. We hadn't spoken in years. "Trevor," he said, "I know we don't talk much, but I just wanted to say I've been watching all this unfold, and I think you did the right thing." I didn't know what to say. He continued, "I talked to your mom. She's rattled. But I told her straight up she messed up. You built something. She tried to give it away like it didn't matter." He paused. "You're not the bad guy here. Don't let her make you feel like you are." And just like that, the air shifted. I'd spent so long feeling like the villain of someone else's story. But now, I saw the truth. I was never the villain. I just stopped playing the role of the victim. That weekend, Marco came by again. We sat on the couch, my couch, eating pizza and watching some terrible horror movie on Netflix. Halfway through, he nudged me. "You seem lighter," he said. "I am," I replied, because I was. The apartment finally felt like mine again, not just the walls and the furniture, but the space, the energy, the freedom. No more second-guessing every footstep, no more wondering what I'd find when I came home, no more feeling like a guest in my own life, just peace. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. It was from Leah. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. It read, "I guess you got what you wanted. I'm back at Mom's for now. She's barely speaking to me. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of leech now. Thanks for that. I don't expect forgiveness, but I thought you should know you really hurt me. I know I messed up, but I didn't think you'd go nuclear on your own family. Anyway, hope your precious apartment's worth it." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. Not because I planned to keep it, but because it no longer held power over me. Her words couldn't twist the truth anymore. The truth was, I did get what I wanted. I got my home back. I got my peace back. And most importantly, I got me back. The version of me who didn't need to apologize for setting boundaries, who didn't feel guilty for saying no, who finally understood that family doesn't mean sacrificing your sanity so someone else can avoid growing up. In the months that followed, I kept building. The apartment became something of a haven. Friends would come over and say things like, "Man, this place just feels good." And I'd smile knowing exactly why. I started teaching Grace, my mentee at work, more advanced stuff. She got promoted, called me her career big brother. That one stuck. And Jennifer? She sent me a Christmas card that said, "To my favorite client who took down a family empire with receipts and grace." I laughed out loud. Because yeah, it kind of felt like that. Eventually, I did see my mom again. At a family event. A cousin's wedding. She looked older, tired, worn down by the weight of her own denial. We locked eyes once across the room. She looked away first. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. I had nothing to prove anymore. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about ruining her. It was about removing her. From my space. From my control. From the grip she used to have on my self-worth. And the fallout. It wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was just final. A clean break, a locked door, and a new key. One that only fits my hand now. Because this time I made damn sure there were no spares.